Namaste. Today I wanted to speak a little bit about the mind. If you're on a yogic journey or any spiritual journey that has risen from the East, you will hear a lot about the mind or connecting the mind with the body, the soul. Like, what is the mind? In the yogic discipline, the mind is very different from the brain. The mind actually exists in every single cell of your body. So if you think of your body is 52 trillion vibrating cells. Within each cell, there are atoms, which each cell is an atom. There's protons, neutrons, and electrons. The protons and neutrons being more in the center, the electrons rotating outside of it. These help generate energy. But within every single cell, there is space. There's more space than anything else, just as in our bodies. It is within that space that all the knowledge that we need to know is held, our consciousness. But it is also within that space that the mind exists. So I'm going to try and make this very simple. Just remember, all the concepts I speak about here are at their simplest forms for you to just have a foundation based on truth and knowledge on which you can then water, grow, gain more knowledge. I'd have to be here for a while to go through it all. But let's start with the mind. So in a lot of disciplines, you'll see that they talk about the mind as a wheel with spokes in the center being your consciousness. I like to think of the mind as an ocean. So visualize that this was an ocean. That ocean is known as your chitta. It is the storehouse of all your impressions. So it stores a number of things. It stores all the memories of your ancestors. So every memory held in your ancestors that were repeated, became habits, became memories, deep-seated memories, is held in your chitta. Then there are all of the, what we call samskaras and impressions that have been inscribed on your consciousness from the journey you took before you arrived into this form. Then there are all the impressions, thoughts, ignorances that have been put in you from the time you were born by everything around you. So if you think about it, this ocean is filled with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of impressions and habits and memories. And it's all sitting in the ocean, which is chitta, part of your mind. Now, on any average day, about 16 to 20,000 thoughts rise up into our mind. When we begin the process of meditation, what rises up to the surface is even more, because you are then able to sit and observe it from a place of distance as opposed to becoming entangled in it. But we'll come back there. Now, the next part of the mind is called vitris. So this ocean is here, and it exists in every cell. And impressions will rise for one of two reasons. One is just from the natural flow of the ocean. The constant movement will cause impressions to rise when you least expect it. So sometimes you'll be sitting and a thought will enter your mind and you'll be like, where did that come from? It's just the natural movement of chitta. In other instances, something outside of you will spark a memory, an impression, will ignite it and ask it to rise to the top. Now, we have 10 senses in our body through which things enter and exit. The 5 through which things external to you enter, igniting a movement in your chitta, causing impressions to rise, are our 5 senses. Ears, nose, mouth, eyes, and skin. Then there are 5 areas which things exit from us, which are all called part of our senses. So it's speaking, grasping, procreating, excretion, and walking. So between these 10 things, there are constantly stimuli from the external entering into us, and there's constantly impressions that rise that use one of these things to exit us. Now, knowing that, we'll start here again. So the chitta is here, the storehouse, and there's a movement in it, and an impression rises. Let's say you hear a song through your ears, And in that song, it ignites a memory in you from a time where you were really happy, and in that memory, you were having a beer and a cigarette. And all of a sudden, that impression rises from you, and what it actually wants is a beer and a cigarette, because it thinks, if I just have that beer and cigarette, that happy moment will come back. I will be able to experience that joy. Now, the other parts of the mind are the buddhi, the intellect, the one that is able to observe and think and respond. And let's call these the manas. I like to think of them as vultures. These manas are very doubtful. They're always like, should I not? I'm not sure. Let me think about it. They're very reactive. So when that impression rises and it comes out and it says to your senses, get me a beer, get me a cigarette. If you're tired, you're not in a good place, you're feeling unhappy, you're stressed, you're in a very reactive mode, your manas are going to kick in, pick up this impression, and then go outwards and seek to satisfy it. Buy a beer, have a cigarette, whatever. Now, if you're in a very good place, you're very calm, you're in balance, your buddhi will kick in. Let's think of this as our buddhi, our light. When your buddhi is available and is aware, then what it will do is it'll look at this impression that rises and it'll say, you know what? Drinking that beer and having that cigarette is not going to bring back that memory. It's going to be very short. I'll have the cigarette, I'll have a beer. I might feel happy for a moment, but then that happiness will disappear. And actually, I will have created harm in my body by smoking and drinking. So, you know what? We're just going to not give this any energy. We're going to acknowledge it and say, okay, I hear you. Thank you. We're not going to resist it, because the more we resist it, the more it's going to come back and bother you. We're just going to acknowledge it. And then we're not going to give it any energy, and it's going to come back down to the bottom. Now, when impressions rise up, they're often colored. What we mean by colored is we have attached something to this impression. So an impression rises up, and once again, it's the impression of a cigarette. If it's neutral, it has no influence over you. You just look at it, you see cigarette, okay, it goes down. But more often than not, we have attached colorings to impressions when they arrive. Those colorings are either a like or a dislike, and we have attached a like or a dislike to it. Because if this inherently held a like, then no matter who saw a cigarette, they would eventually like it and want it. But no, actually, everything is neutral in the world. We keep attaching things to it and then giving it influence over us. Or there might be an ignorance attached to it, an ignorance that believes that if you smoke, it's actually healthy for your lungs. So that would be an ignorance. The other thing is sometimes we attach the fifth spoke of the mind is the ego, Ahamkara. This ego is the I. So sometimes an impression rises and it's like, I like and smoke cigarettes. You have attached who you are to this impression. And therefore, it seeks satisfaction in order to validate yourself. Or an impression starts neutral and you attach the ego to it. So from the time we're born this neutral being, because, there's memory of our ancestors, there's memory of our consciousness. But as it enters this world, it enters neutral in this slate, in this existence. And then people begin to attach, or we begin to attach to it. So for example, we're told our nationality. I am Zambian. I am Indian. I'm a girl. I am brown. I am all these things that we're attaching our ego to. So now those things we hang on to because they have been attached to who we are. So mine gets a little more complicated, doesn't it? The chitta, the storehouse, which I like to think of the ocean, all of the impressions at the bottom of them that rise, called vitris, and cause a disturbance on the top of the ocean. And all these impressions are probably colored, and there's 5 ways of coloring it. So it was the like, dislike, the ego, ignorance, but then there is also fear of death, which we attach to impressions, which we attach to thoughts. There's always some sort of fear, the premises of it being fear of death as opposed to acceptance of it. So think of it, all those impressions keep rising up in your mind. And then remember, when you're tired, the manas pick at it and they continue to try and satisfy them through your senses, never knowing or remembering that anything you satisfy is fleeting. It's maybe for 1 minute, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then it disappears. Or the buddhi picks it up and says, no, I'm observing this and I am understanding it and I'm not going to allow it to have influence over me. And then the slow peeling away of our ego from it so it can remain neutral. It's why we feel like we're crazy, really, because this is part of the human form. There's a consciousness, remember, that has entered us into a human form, but the human form is made of those senses, forces, matter, vibration. And it's constantly pulling you in different directions because the human form wants to exist. We want to exist. And that's why we have this concept of duality, of separation. You are there, I am here. Because you are there, I know I exist. But if we were all just one, we wouldn't know we existed because there would be nothing for us to exist against. So everything in the human form is always trying to separate us from everything, and then gives us the idea that we have to reach external to ourselves to give us satisfaction and happiness. So the reason we start to purify the mind is that only when the mind is completely pure, and what we mean by pure is that when impressions rise, they're neutral. They're not influencing us, they're not pulling us, they're not defining how we behave. It's pure. And only when it is pure, it is like a mirror that has been defogged. So when a mirror is all foggy and dirty, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you can't really see yourself, it's distorted. But when you clean the mirror and it's crystal clear, when you see yourself, when you look into it, you can actually see yourself clearly. It's the same thing with the mind. When we purify the mind and we connect to our consciousness, our true selves, where we see the reflection of our true selves is in our mind. And we can never really see it when it's dirty, which is what yamas and niyamas are, which are the 10 guidelines as to how we live our lives as yogis, which are very similar to the 10 commandments. Those 10 commandments, those 5 yamas and niyamas, all they seek to do is purify the mind. So when you say don't lie, you never lie. There is never a reason to lie unless it is to save a life. Don't lie to yourself, don't lie to others. Don't engage in violence. Don't have violent thoughts about yourself or others. Don't engage in physical, mental, emotional violence. Don't steal people's joy. Don't steal objects. All of those things are purifying the mind. So what is inside the mind is clean and positive and pure so that you can see the true reflection of yourself. So it's not easy. If you're on this journey, understand that it's really hard and it's a lifelong journey. It never stops because this is super complicated. Never mind this, there are also different layers in our bodies. There's different energy systems. We are the most complex, sophisticated system in the world, which is really tough when we're engaged in it, but it's really amazing where we can observe it and use it to fulfill our purpose. Because when you connect to your true self, it will lead you exactly where you're meant to go, but you don't know where you're supposed to go unless you can see it in the clarity of the mind. So when you begin to meditate and impressions start to rise, the whole point is not to resist it, follow it, go where it wants to take you, observe it. Observe the colorings you've put in it, observe where it's come from, who's given it to you. Acknowledge it, and then just stop giving it energy and come back to your breath or your mantra or whichever way you have chosen to meditate. And eventually those will start to burn. Those seeds will come back into its seeds form. That tree you've grown into your head will be chopped down. But know that when we say letting go, it doesn't mean it disappears from you. No, those impressions are always there. It takes a super advanced yogi to actually burn the seeds of your impressions as well. But what it means is you're neutralizing them. And so those seeds, those impressions no longer have power of you. And as a result, as you step forward, where you step forward into will not reflect your present or your past, because your thoughts will no longer be the influence that keeps taking you into the same place. It will actually be your true self. So namaste. Good luck with it. It's really hard, but it's so, so worth it, because nothing else has to change in your life. In 19 years of living on this island, everything around me is the same, but my reality keeps changing because my frequency keeps changing. And as you get to higher and higher frequencies, different things come into your life. Different people, different opportunities, different doors. And all I did was raise my frequency. I didn't change the country I lived in, didn't change my hair, didn't change my clothes, didn't change anything, just changed what I did with this. Namaste. Have a beautiful day.